Millionaire followed the maid after midnight out of curiosity, not knowing she was saving someone he loved. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The night had settled over the Hale estate like a velvet curtain, thick and quiet, with the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel louder. Inside the mansion, most of the staff had gone home, leaving only the late shift housekeeper, a few security guards, and Grace Miller, the maid who always seemed to move like a soft whisper through the hallways. Ethan Hale, the man whose name sat atop half the tech towers in Manhattan, should have been asleep hours ago, but rest rarely came easily these days. His mind was a maze of business decisions, medical charts, and the constant ache of worrying about his younger sister Lily. That was why he noticed it, a faint rustle near the service hallway, a shadow slipping past the kitchen doors. He wouldn't have paid attention if it were anyone else, but Grace moved with intention, clutching a small canvas bag to her chest, her shoulders tense. She paused at the back exit, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid of being seen. Ethan stood at the top of the stairs, half hidden in the dark, his curiosity flickering awake. Grace was gentle, quiet, almost impossible to read. She kept to herself, did her work well, smiled politely when spoken to. She was the last person he expected to sneak out past midnight. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she simply forgot the time. But something about the urgency in her posture made him stay silent instead of calling out. She slipped outside into the cool night air. Ethan hesitated only a moment before following her, keeping a careful distance. He wasn't angry. He wasn't suspicious of wrongdoing. He just needed to understand what could pull a maid into the streets at this hour with a medic bag strapped to her side. The gravel crunched softly beneath his shoes as he trailed her toward the edge of the estate, then through the narrow path leading toward the old maintenance road. Streetlights were sparse out here, and the moon did most of the work, outlining her silhouette as she walked faster, almost running. Ethan felt the weight of something he couldn't name tighten in his chest. Grace wasn't reckless. She wasn't careless. So why did she look scared? He lengthened his stride, careful not to reveal himself too soon. His breath formed pale clouds in the cold air, mixing with hers in the distance as she disappeared behind the abandoned storage building near the creek. Ethan frowned. No one ever went there. No one had a reason to. Until tonight. He stepped closer to the edge of the abandoned building, slowing his breath so it would not echo into the quiet night. A soft glow flickered from inside, warm and trembling like someone had set a lantern on a stack of old crates. Ethan moved carefully, letting his eyes adjust. Grace was kneeling on the ground, her back slightly hunched, her bag open beside her. He could hear her voice, low and steady, a tone he had never heard from her before, gentle but urgent in a way that pushed at his chest. She whispered, "It is all right, just breathe with me. I am here." Ethan leaned a shoulder lightly against the cold wall, peering past the broken doorway. At first, all he saw was Grace, her hands moving with precision as she pressed a damp cloth to someone's forehead. Then the figure shifted, revealing soft blonde hair and a familiar necklace catching the lantern light. Ethan's pulse stumbled. Lily. His sister sat propped against a wooden crate, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow but calm. She looked pale, but there was no fear on her face, only exhaustion. Grace brushed hair away from Lily's cheek with a tenderness that made Ethan freeze in place. Lily whispered something, too soft to hear, and Grace nodded as if she had understood every word. Ethan felt the world tilt, confusion rushing through him. Lily was supposed to be at a private medical facility under round-the-clock supervision. He had approved every detail himself. So why was she here, in a forgotten corner of the estate, resting her head on Grace's shoulder like she trusted her more than anyone else. Grace checked Lily's pulse with practiced fingers. "Your breathing is slowing down. That is good." "You scared me," she murmured, offering a small smile. Lily weakly returned it. "Thank you for coming," Lily whispered. "I did not know who else to call." Grace squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing. We will get through this. And I will not tell your brother yet. You need a moment without pressure." Ethan felt the words hit him like a quiet weight. Pressure. Was that what Lily felt whenever he tried to protect her? He watched as Grace reached into her bag, pulling out a small inhaler and guiding Lily to use it. Her movements were steady, experienced. This was not the first time she had done this. Lily's breath eased, her shoulders relaxing as color returned to her cheeks. Grace exhaled, relieved. "There you go. Much better," she said softly. For a moment, they simply sat together, the lantern's glow wrapping around them like a small sanctuary. Ethan felt something unfamiliar stir inside him. He had followed Grace expecting answers. Instead, he found his sister trusting her in a way she had not trusted him in years. Grace looked at Lily with a tenderness he wished he could offer without overwhelming her. It made him wonder what else he had misunderstood. Lily spoke again, barely audible. Grace leaned in. "I know," she whispered back. "You do not have to hide from me." Ethan's hand tightened on the doorway frame. He had thought Grace was a quiet maid who spent her days folding linens and wiping marble countertops. But in this dim, forgotten room, she was something else entirely. Someone strong. Someone capable. Someone his sister relied on. And for the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of fear, not of Grace, but of how little he truly knew about the people in his own home. Grace adjusted the blanket around Lily's shoulders, her movements slow and careful, as if she feared even the smallest gesture might disturb the fragile calm that had finally settled over her. The lantern cast a soft halo around them, warming the cold concrete floor and painting their faces in gentle gold. Ethan remained just outside the doorway, pressed against the shadows, unable to step forward yet unable to walk away. He watched Grace check Lily's breathing again, her fingertips steady, her expression focused. It struck him how practiced she seemed, as though midnight emergencies were simply part of her life. When Lily opened her eyes a little more, Grace spoke with that same reassuring tone. "Take a sip," she said, lifting a small bottle of water to her lips. "Slow sips. You will feel better." Lily obeyed, her hands trembling slightly. When she finished, she leaned her head back, exhaling softly. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should not have called you so late." Grace shook her head. "You call me whenever you need to. That is what support is. You are not a burden." The simplicity of her words curled into Ethan like a quiet truth he did not want to confront. He had always believed he was protecting Lily by keeping her world small, safe, structured. But maybe he had made it too small. Too controlled. Grace packed away a few supplies, placing them neatly into the canvas bag. "Your episode was lighter than last time," she murmured gently. "That is a good sign. But we need to talk about why you keep leaving the facility without warning." Lily looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of the blanket between her fingers. "I feel trapped there. Everyone watches me like I am about to fall apart. I cannot breathe in that place." Grace nodded, her voice softening even more. "I understand. You want freedom. You want to feel like a person, not a patient. But disappearing alone is dangerous. If you must get away, you need someone with you." Lily gave her a faint smile. "Like you?" Grace returned the smile. "Yes. Like me. You can always call me, day or night." The warmth between them settled like a gentle tide, familiar and effortless in a way that made Ethan's chest tighten. He had not seen Lily smile like that in months. She trusted Grace. Deeply. Enough to run to her instead of him. He took a small step forward, gravel shifting under his shoe. Grace's head snapped up. Her eyes, startled at first, softened when she recognized him. Lily's breath hitched. "Ethan," she whispered. Ethan stepped fully into the lantern light, his expression caught somewhere between confusion, relief, and something he could not yet name. "I did not mean to frighten you," he said quietly, his voice low. "I saw Grace leaving. I followed because I did not understand." He looked at Lily, then back. At Grace. "I think I am starting to." Grace rose to her feet slowly, her hands clasped in front of her, unsure if she had done something wrong. Lily shifted, trying to sit straighter. Ethan moved closer, his voice gentle. "You should have told me what was going on." Lily's eyes glimmered, not angry, only tired. "I did not want you to worry more than you already do." Grace placed a calming hand on her shoulder. She did what she thought was best. Ethan met Grace's eyes then, really met them, seeing not a maid in a uniform but a woman who had stepped in where he could not. A woman who had been saving his sister in the quiet spaces he never knew existed. The night air felt different now, charged with unspoken truths, with questions he had never thought to ask, and with a growing realization that nothing about Grace Miller was as simple as he once assumed. For a moment, none of them spoke. The abandoned storage room felt strangely warmer, as if the quiet truth hanging between them carried its own kind of heat. Ethan knelt beside Lily, not wanting to overwhelm her, just lowering himself enough so she did not have to lift her eyes too far to see him. "You scared me," he said softly, but without accusation. Lily gave a tiny shrug, guilt flickering in her expression. "I did not want to be trapped there anymore. The nurses mean well, but they look at me like I am glass." Grace stayed close enough to catch Lily if she swayed, yet far enough not to intrude on the siblings' moment. Ethan noticed the careful balance, the patience in her posture, and the way she kept her attention on Lily rather than on him. "You could have told me," Ethan said gently. "You could have told me you felt that way." Lily let out a tired breath. "You already carry so much. I did not want to make things harder." Ethan shook his head slowly. "You are never a burden to me." Grace's eyes softened, as if she understood exactly how hard it was for both of them to say these things out loud. Lily shifted slightly, leaning into the crate for support. "I called Grace because she listens without making me feel small," she whispered. "She makes the world feel safe." Ethan glanced at Grace with something like realization, something that made his breath catch for a moment. She looked startled by Lily's words, as though she was not used to being praised. "I only did what anyone would do," Grace murmured. Ethan knew that was not true. Not everyone would leave the warmth of the mansion to run into the night. Not everyone would calm Lily with such gentleness or treat her condition with such calm understanding. Grace was not performing a duty. She was offering genuine care. "We need to get Lily back to the house," Ethan said softly. "She needs rest, and it is too cold out here." Grace nodded immediately. "She can walk, but slowly. We will go at her pace." Lily managed a small smile. "You two sound like you rehearsed that." Grace blushed slightly, shaking her head. Ethan stood and offered Lily his hands. She hesitated but eventually placed her palms in his, letting him guide her up. Grace steadied her from the other side, her movements synchronized with Lily's weak steps. The walk back toward the estate was slow, quiet, and illuminated only by the pale moonlight filtering through the trees. Grace stayed attentive, adjusting her grip whenever Lily wavered. Ethan watched the way she worked, calm, focused, entirely present. There was no fear in her movements. Only compassion. Halfway down the path, Lily whispered, "I did not want you to worry. I just needed to breathe." Ethan exhaled, his voice low. "I would rather worry 1,000 times than lose you once." Grace's expression shifted with understanding, though she did not speak. The gravel crunched softly under their shoes as the estate lights came into view, warm and steady against the dark sky. Lily's breaths evened out, gratitude easing the tension in her features. When they reached the back terrace, Grace paused before the door, looking to Ethan as if awaiting permission to continue inside. For a moment, he simply looked at her, truly seeing her. This quiet maid who had stepped into the shadows of his life and illuminated something he had not realized was missing. "Come in," he said, his voice gentler than before. "You are not done helping us yet." Grace nodded, not out of obligation, but out of a promise she had already been keeping long before he knew she was keeping it. The back terrace door eased shut behind them with a muted click, sealing the three of them inside the quiet warmth of the Hale estate. The shift from the cool night air to the gentle indoor heat made Lily sigh with relief as she leaned lightly against Grace for balance. Ethan walked close on her other side, protective but careful not to smother her. In the soft glow of the hallway sconces, Lily's pale face looked calmer, less strained, as though the safety of familiar walls gave her a moment to breathe. Grace guided her to the nearest sitting room, a small space with plush armchairs and a low table stacked with books Lily used to love. Grace helped her settle onto the couch, adjusting a soft blanket over her legs, then crouched to meet her eyes. "Do you feel lightheaded?" she asked gently. Lily shook her head. "Just tired." Grace nodded and checked her pulse again, her fingers steady and warm. Ethan watched her work, noting every detail, how she counted silently, how she studied Lily's breathing, how her presence seemed to ground the room itself. When Grace finally stood, Ethan met her eyes. "Thank you," he said, the words quiet but sincere. Grace shook her head as if she did not deserve gratitude. She needed someone. "I was available." Lily let out a soft laugh. "She is being modest. She has been helping me for months." Ethan turned sharply to his sister. "Months?" Lily looked almost guilty. "I did not want to worry you." And Grace never asked for anything. She just helped. Grace's cheeks warmed, but she held her composure. "She reached out to me during a difficult moment. I could not ignore her." Ethan took in the confession slowly, feeling a mixture of surprise, guilt, and respect weave through him. Lily had been struggling more than he realized. And Grace had stepped in quietly, without expecting recognition, without demanding anything in return. A faint tremor passed through Lily's hands. Grace noticed instantly and sat beside her. "You need to rest," she said softly. "Your breathing will stay steady if you relax your shoulders." Lily nodded and leaned against the cushions. Grace reached for a pillow to support her side. Ethan stepped forward. "Let me help." Grace paused, then handed him the pillow. Together, in a wordless rhythm, they adjusted Lily until she was comfortable. For a moment their hands brushed, brief but warm, and both of them stilled, surprised by the gentle spark that passed between them. Grace recovered first, smoothing the blanket. Ethan cleared his throat softly, unsure what to make of that fleeting moment. Lily's eyes fluttered open. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" she asked Grace. "Of course," Grace replied instantly. Ethan lowered himself into an armchair nearby. "I will stay too." Grace glanced at him, uncertain if he meant it, but he settled in with quiet conviction. The room softened into a peaceful hush. The fireplace clicked on automatically, spreading a low amber glow across the shelves. Lily's breathing evened out, calm and slow, drifting toward sleep. Grace watched her closely, the way a guardian watches over something fragile yet precious. Ethan watched Grace, not out of suspicion anymore, but out of growing understanding. All this time he thought he was the one protecting his sister. But it had been Grace who stepped into the places he could not see, who offered comfort without being asked, who saw Lily not as a responsibility but as a person. As Lily drifted deeper into rest, Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet enough not to wake her. "Grace," he said, "I think I owe you more than a thank you." Grace looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You do not owe me anything, Mr. Hale." "Maybe I do," Ethan replied softly. For the first time, she did not look away. Grace held Ethan's gaze for a moment, unsure what he meant, unsure if she should brace herself or breathe easier. The soft crackle of the fireplace filled the room as Lily slept peacefully on the couch, her breaths even and steady beneath the warm blanket. Grace glanced at her, confirming she was still resting well, before returning her attention to Ethan. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, his voice low so it would not disturb his sister. "I thought I knew everything that happened inside this house," he said. "But tonight showed me how wrong I was." Grace clasped her hands gently in her lap, her posture attentive but cautious. "You have many responsibilities, Mr. Hale. It is understandable that you cannot see everything." Ethan shook his head slowly. "That is not an excuse. Lily needed something I did not give her. And you stepped in without being asked." Grace opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand softly. "You helped her breathe again tonight. You helped her feel safe. That is not a small thing." Grace lowered her eyes for a moment, her voice soft. "She reminds me of someone I used to care for. Someone who also felt trapped by expectations. When Lily reached out to me, I understood her fear." Ethan studied her face, the quiet sincerity in her expression. "You never told anyone," he said. Grace shook her head. "Lily asked me not to. She wanted a place where she could be seen as a person, not a patient or a problem." The words settled heavily between them. Ethan leaned back in the chair, rubbing his thumb along the edge of the armrest, processing everything. "She trusts you," he said. "More than anyone." Grace hesitated before responding. "Trust grows where someone feels heard." That sentence lingered in the air like a gentle truth. Ethan looked at his sister's resting form, her features softer than they had been in weeks. He exhaled. "I want to do better," he murmured. "For her. And maybe for myself too." Grace watched him carefully, sensing the vulnerability in his tone. "You love her," she said softly. "That is already something strong." Ethan looked back at her, something unspoken shifting in his eyes. "How did you learn to speak to people like that?" She almost smiled. "Life teaches patience when you have no choice but to learn it." He wanted to ask more, to understand the story behind those words, but Lily stirred slightly, pulling their attention back to her. Grace rose from her seat and adjusted the blanket around Lily's shoulders, her touch gentle, almost protective. Ethan watched the way she moved, as if she belonged in this room, not as an employee, but as someone essential. "She will sleep for a while," Grace whispered. "If her breathing stays steady, she will wake feeling stronger." Ethan nodded. "Will you stay until then?" Grace hesitated for just a second, not because she did not want to stay, but because she was unsure if she should. "If you need me to," she replied quietly. Ethan stood and stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I think we both do." Grace's breath caught slightly, though she kept her composure. She settled back into the chair beside the couch, her hands folded neatly. Ethan returned to his seat opposite her. For the first time since he had walked into that abandoned building, the weight in his chest eased. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the heater and the rhythmic sound of Lily breathing. Grace glanced at Ethan. He met her eyes without looking away. And in that unbroken exchange, something subtle shifted, an understanding, a question, and the beginning of something neither of them had expected when the night first began. The quiet of the sitting room deepened as the night stretched on, the kind of quiet that made every breath feel more pronounced, every small movement more meaningful. Lily slept peacefully, her face relaxed in a way Ethan had not seen in far too long. Grace remained beside her, alert but calm, as if she had trained herself to rest without ever fully letting her guard down. Ethan watched her carefully, noticing how she tilted her head now and then to listen to Lily's breathing, how she adjusted the blanket with the lightest touch, how she carried a steadiness that felt almost healing just to witness. After a while, Grace looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. She is stabilizing. Her heart rate is steady, and her breathing is smooth. She should rest for a few hours. Ethan nodded, relieved. I cannot thank you enough for tonight. Grace shook her head gently. You do not have to thank me. She needed help. I was here. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her with a quiet intensity. You keep saying it like it is simple, but you went out there at night alone. You took a risk for her. Grace hesitated. Sometimes people need someone who will show up, no matter the hour. There was a weight behind those words, something personal, something that hinted at a history she had never shared. Ethan wanted to ask, but Lily shifted slightly, reminding him that the moment was still fragile. Grace adjusted the blanket again, her movements tender. She will be all right, she murmured. But she will need stability. Emotional stability. That matters as much as medical care. Ethan felt those words land heavily on him. I thought I was giving her stability by controlling her environment. Grace met his eyes. Control and care are not always the same. He exhaled slowly, absorbing that. You speak like someone who has lived this, he said softly. Grace hesitated, then nodded once. I have seen what pressure can do. To someone young. To someone scared. Ethan watched her face as she said it, the shadows from the fireplace dancing gently across her features. Who did you care for? He asked gently. Grace looked down, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the blanket. For a moment, he thought she would answer. But then she shook her head. Someone from a long time ago, she whispered. Someone I could not save the way I wanted to. Ethan felt something in his chest tighten again, not out of pity, but out of understanding. Grace was not just kind. She was carrying something, too. Something that made her fight harder for Lily than anyone else could. The clock on the mantel clicked softly, marking the slow passing minutes. Grace looked toward the window, where faint traces of dawn were beginning to touch the sky. It will be morning soon, she murmured. You should rest, Mr. Hale. Ethan shook his head. I will stay here. Grace hesitated. You do not have to. I want to, he said simply. She did not argue. Instead, she settled deeper into her seat, her eyes on Lily, her presence steady as ever. Ethan watched her for a long moment, realizing something he had not understood before tonight. Grace was not just helping Lily survive. She was helping her breathe again. And as dawn crept closer, Ethan found himself wondering if Grace had been guiding him towards something he had forgotten how to feel as well. The early morning light slowly crept across the sitting room, soft and pale, brushing against the furniture like a quiet reminder that the world outside was waking up. Lily was still asleep, her breathing steady, her features peaceful under the warm blanket. Grace had not moved far from her side, her posture relaxed but attentive, while Ethan sat across from them, watching the gentle rise and fall of his sister's chest with a newfound calm he was not used to feeling. As the sun inched higher, Grace finally glanced at Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. She will be able to wake soon. When she does, she will likely feel embarrassed. These episodes can make a person feel exposed. Ethan nodded slowly. I know. She always tries to hide how much she struggles. Grace folded her hands loosely in her lap. Because she loves you. And she does. Not want to add weight to your already full shoulders. Ethan leaned back, his breath steady. I have been carrying things alone for so long that I forgot how to let anyone help. Grace looked at him gently. You do not have to carry everything alone. There was no judgment in her voice, only an honest warmth that made him pause. The room felt softer because of her presence. It always had. Ethan studied her quietly, tracing the calm lines of her posture, the steadiness in her expression, and the way she always centered herself around Lily's needs rather than her own. Grace, he said finally, I want you to stay on in a different capacity. Not as a maid. As something more aligned with what you have been doing for Lily. Grace blinked, her expression surprised. What do you mean? Ethan leaned forward, his tone sincere. I want you to be her wellness coordinator. Someone who supports her emotional and physical needs, someone she trusts. Grace looked down for a moment, absorbing his words. Mr. Hale, that is a large responsibility. I am not sure I qualify for, you qualify, he interrupted softly. You have been doing the work long before I realized it existed. Grace hesitated, conflicted. If Lily wants that, then I will stay. But only if she is comfortable. She must choose. Ethan nodded. She will choose you. She already has. Before Grace could respond, Lily's voice drifted weakly from the couch. Choose her for what? Grace immediately turned to her, checking her pulse with gentle fingers. How do you feel? She asked softly. Like I fell asleep inside a warm cloud, Lily murmured, managing a small smile. Ethan moved closer, kneeling beside her. Grace has been taking care of you for a while. I did not realize how much. I want her to continue helping you, officially. Lily looked up at Grace, her eyes glassy but bright. You want to stay? Grace felt her throat tighten slightly. Only if you want me to. Lily reached for her hand. I do. Ethan watched the exchange, feeling something settle in his chest, a sense of reassurance he had not felt in years. Grace squeezed Lily's hand. Then I will stay. The decision hung in the air, warm and certain. Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight he had carried for so long begin to shift, not because someone had taken it from him, but because someone had chosen to share it. And for the first time, he let that truth in fully. The morning light grew stronger, filling the sitting room with a soft golden warmth that touched the walls, the bookshelves, and the quiet faces of the three people gathered inside. Lily rested with her head slightly propped up, looking stronger than she had hours before. Grace sat beside her with an ease that came from genuine care, while Ethan stood near the window, watching the sunlight stretch across the floor like a promise of something new. When he turned back toward them, there was a calm steadiness in his expression that had not been there the night before. He walked closer, his voice gentle. We will make this work, he said. All of us. Lily smiled faintly. I think we already started. Ethan sat on the edge of the chair closest to her. I thought protecting you meant limiting you, he admitted quietly. But maybe protecting you means listening more and controlling less. Lily reached for his hand, and he took it carefully. You are trying, she said. That matters to me. Grace watched the exchange with a soft warmth in her eyes. She had seen families fracture under fear and expectations, but this moment felt different. It felt like the beginning of healing. Ethan looked at Grace then, truly looked at her, with gratitude clear in his expression. You changed everything tonight, he said gently. Not just for Lily, but for me as well. Grace shook her head lightly. I did not change anything. I only helped where I could. No, Ethan replied, his voice deeper, sincere. You reminded me what care looks like. What connection feels like. Grace held his gaze, surprised by the honesty in his tone. The room fell into a comfortable quiet, the kind that only comes when trust begins to grow. Lily watched the two of them with a sleepy smile. You know, she whispered, Grace did something that even the doctors could not do. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What is that? Lily grinned softly. She made me feel understood. Grace's cheeks warmed, but she kept her composure. You made that possible by letting me in, she said. Ethan took a breath, steady and sure. Then let us keep letting you in. The offer hung in the air, gentle but meaningful. Grace nodded slowly. I will do my best. Your best, Ethan said quietly, is exactly what we need. As Lily drifted back into a light rest, Ethan walked Grace to the hallway just outside the sitting room. They stopped near the doorway, the sunlight framing them in a soft glow. Ethan spoke first, his tone low but warm. "Grace, I want you to know that what you did tonight, it went far beyond duty. You showed my sister compassion. You showed her she is not alone. I will always be grateful for that." Grace looked down briefly, her voice soft. "I only did what my heart would not let me ignore." Ethan felt something shift inside him, something quiet but unmistakably real. "I hope," he said carefully, "that in time, you will let me repay that kindness." Grace looked up, her eyes meeting his with a calm that felt both grounding and unexpectedly tender. "Kindness does not need repayment," she said gently. "It only needs to be continued." Ethan held her gaze, a faint smile touching the corner of his lips. "Then let us continue it. Together." For a moment, everything stilled, the early morning light, the soft hum of the house, the weight of the long night behind them, and in that stillness, something new began to take shape. Not obligation. Not gratitude. Something warmer. Something hopeful. Grace nodded, and Ethan felt the quiet promise settle between them like the first glow of a sunrise.